G'day. Today I want to talk about the Nikon FTZ adapter and how it saved my Z6 and the lens that I had attached to it at the time. So this is my my new FTZ adapter. I had to pay a pretty penny for this, I'll tell you, because this was a few weeks ago during COVID, and as far as I could tell, they only had one of these in Brisbane. So they could basically charge me whatever they wanted, and they did. Anyway, I needed it because although I have 3 Z mount lenses, I still have a couple of F mounts, which I still adapt. So I needed it. So let me tell you the story, basically, what happened. This was horrible, but basically I was photographing a property. So I had the camera up on a tripod, and I needed to take the camera off the tripod for whatever reason. And I had it mounted on the tripod with the standard tripod head. I'll talk to you about this later. This is the Arca-Swiss mount, but at the time I was using just a regular tripod head. I had it on there. I couldn't get it off because I'd done it so tight because I didn't want my precious camera to fall off. I just had the Z6 for like a week at that point, so I couldn't get it off. So I used 2 hands, and it came free. And of course, as soon as it came free, the camera falls forward, and of course, my reaction, maybe I could have grabbed it, I don't know, but I went like this and hit the ground. It wasn't solid ground, it was carpet, but it was like a really thin, more like office style carpet, still pretty firm. Anyway, so hit the ground. It was awful, almost cried. After 10 minutes or so, I pulled myself together, walked over to the camera, saw it lying on the ground. I could see the lens was disconnected from the body, so I'm like, oh my god, this is gonna cost me money. I've ruined my baby, basically. Luckily, all my gear's insured, but so in the worst case, I could have got it replaced. But you really don't want to use insurance if you don't have to. I did have a lens a couple of years ago break on me, and I got it paid out, and I got a new one, and that was a $3,000 lens, basically. So that was fantastic. I really needed that lens, so that was great. But my premium went up a couple of $100, so at some point I'll have paid back that money. But in the meantime, I needed it, so fantastic. And I just pay a little bit more extra year, whatever. But so yeah, you don't want to be claiming on your insurance. And then if you claim too much, you can become uninsurable, which is a scary thought. But anyway, so I saw the camera lying on the ground, picked it up, and I noticed this is my old FTZ adapter. This is the one I had on at the time, all right? So I don't know if you can see this, but that's where it broke, okay? It's totally come disconnected, okay? So this is the new one. That's how it's meant to look. Here's the broken one. Oh dear. What it has is these 2 little screws have totally come out. They're gone. There's one screw here which was still attached, but just this little bit of plastic, that's totally disconnected. So the first thing I did was I took the camera body and the lens to my camera repair shop and gave it to them to have a look at. And after a couple of days, they got back to me and they said, yeah, the adapters carked it, but you can just get another one. So that's okay. The body, they couldn't see anything wrong with it at all. The lens, it wasn't zooming, it had locked up. But they said they opened it up. They just had to move something back into its track for the zoom ring, and now it just works totally fine. So the body and the lens just working perfectly as if nothing happened. Amazing. So I just had to get a new adapter. So there's 4 things I learned from this. Okay. So the first obvious one is this is actually kind of a safety precaution in a way. In that instance, you know, it broke the fall. It sacrificed itself, and yeah, because I don't know if Nikon manufacture these intentionally to not be weak, but to not be as strong as the mount on the body or the lens, so that if anything, if there is pressure applied, that this is the first thing to break. So it just needs to be weaker enough compared to those two things. So perhaps they did that on purpose as like as a safety precaution. So that's pretty cool if they did. The other thing, so on the camera I was using at the time, I've got one of these on both of my Z6s, the same as the one that I'm recording on right now. I purchased this SmallRig L Plate, or L-Bracket, and actually the reason I got it was because my pinky finger needed somewhere to sit, so I pretty much got it almost for that reason. But it actually hugs the body of the Z6 so nicely. I think it stops it twisting, and I think that actually gave it some extra structural integrity. So I'm going to make sure I leave these on all the time now for that reason. But something else that was interesting, when I purchased the SmallRig, and I know that I'm not the only one that made this mistake, because I've seen in the comments on their website other people wondering the same, was they thought there's a little attachment here which if you have the FTZ adapter mounted, you can get the adapter which then screws onto this. That comes out, these two little holes here, it comes out and then screws up into the adapter. And that seems like a really good idea, and I wanted that, but I thought it came with it, but it actually doesn't. It's an extra that you can grab. It's not very expensive, but I just thought it came with it. But actually, in hindsight, if that had been attached, then I'm not sure that the adapter would have broken the same, because the part that broke is actually where it attaches to the camera. It's the camera mount side that broke. The lens mount side stayed intact. So if this had been attached to the camera like that firmly, this wouldn't have been able to break, which means this must have broken instead. And maybe it would have, or maybe the lens mount would have broken instead. And if that had happened, I would have been up for an expensive repair or a new lens, who knows. What I didn't say previously was the lens that I had to get claimed on insurance. It actually wasn't completely broken. There was just one part in the lens where the aperture ring occasionally got stuck. They just had to replace one like arm or whatever that adjusted the aperture, but they don't make that anymore because it's an older lens. So if they don't make the part anymore, then you have to get a whole new part. So that lens basically was a write-off, which was pretty, so it's like I can still use it most of the time. It's just totally unreliable. So I can't use it for a professional job, but I could use it just for my own family portraits or anything, or landscapes, anything like that. So that's the first lesson, that perhaps the FTZ adapter is actually a bit of a safety precaution to have on your camera. Something I've not heard talked about at all, so that's kind of interesting. The second lesson I learned is you've got to use ArcaSwiss to mount your camera onto the tripod, right? Because ArcaSwiss, the SmallRig L-Bracket has the ArcaSwiss already on there, so that's so cool. You can I don't have to have a tripod mount on here. This is a tripod mount if you've got an ArcaSwiss attachment. And what happens is it slides into these two tracks, and then it can still slide out that horizontally, but it's pretty much locked in there. So you can let go and it'll not move, right? So then you can tighten it into place. But if you're having trouble loosening it, or when you loosen it, the camera's not going to just fall to the ground like mine did previously, because I had the regular old school style tripod mount. So I think that is a huge advantage for ArcaSwiss. Just for that reason alone, I'm going to swap over. Let alone the convenience of just being able to slide this in and out to your tripod whenever you like. It's also got this side plate, so I can mount the camera sideways on the tripod as well. Amazing. And I feel like that adds protection. That's point number 2. Switch to ArcaSwiss. It's really a far superior tripod mounting system. Point number 3 is just about backups. I'm talking to you photographers. I'm talking also to brides and grooms as something to look for in your photographer. So there's one thing to do, which is back up your photos when you get home, or back them up as you're shooting. Have a second card in your camera so you can record to 2 cards at once. Then if one card fails, which never happens, but in the rare event it does, you've got a backup. But what I want to talk about right now in regards to backups is having backup cameras and lenses on the day. So anything can happen on a wedding, you know, or any shoot. This was just a real estate shoot, so it didn't matter too much. But this camera was out of action. I dropped it on the ground. I had another camera sitting in my car. If I'm on a wedding, I have 2 cameras on me at all times. So if I break one of the cameras, I've got another camera right there, ready to go straight away. And on a wedding, I also have 2 more cameras in the boot of my car, a whole kit, right? Lenses, flashes, the lot. So who knows what could happen, because I'm clearly a clumsy photographer, right? I just told you the story about dropping my camera. Anyway, maybe I fell over, landed on one camera. The other one I was in my hand and I dropped it as well. Both my cameras are ruined, right? That would be terrible, especially if it happened in front of a client. That would be pretty bad. But I would always have a whole 2 backup cameras in the boot of my car. So they're not Z6s. It's my old cameras, the D800 and the D600. Still fantastic cameras. I was shooting on both of them up until earlier this year when I swapped over. So, you know, they're fine, both full frame. But yeah, so they're ready to go. So I say this for photographers. You hear so many people, you know, they buy their first full frame camera and they say, all right, I'm going to go advertise that I'm a photographer. I'm going to go shoot a wedding. Well, you're playing with someone's memories of their wedding day, you know. Anything could happen, and if you've only got 1 camera, I'm sorry, that's not good enough. You cannot go photograph a wedding with just 1 camera, because who knows what could happen. And if that camera stops working, then you can't capture the wedding. That is worst case scenario. So please don't do that. Do not shoot a wedding unless you have at least 1 camera backup and lens and flash, everything, the whole deal, right? And for brides and grooms, I'm talking to you now. When you're booking a photographer, especially if you're going for a cheaper option, right? Someone who just wants experience, or maybe they're advertising as a proper professional, but their prices are noticeably cheaper than everybody else's. Okay, they probably only have 1 camera. They probably have a full-time job during the week, 9 to 5, and they just want to shoot some weddings on the weekend. I mean, great, but you're putting someone's wedding memories at risk. So don't let them do that to you. When you book a photographer, check how many cameras do you have? How many backups? What's your backup procedure as well? I'd love to make another video just about backups. If anyone's interested, let me know. And this brings me to point number 4, and this is really directed at other photographers new to the business and learning, as I am. We're all learning all the time. But this job in particular, where I broke my adapter, be wary of cheap work, all right? Now, obviously, you're going to be wary of that anyway, but consider this, okay? This job I happened to be doing was, it was a real estate job. It was for a rental. And I don't know what it's like in the rest of the world, but in Australia, rental photography, there's so many photographers happy to do that, right? If you're doing a sales property, it's the next step up. The pictures need to look really clean and polished and perfect, right? But for rentals, you just really need to be doing a better job than the estate agent with their phone, right? And that's not, if you're using a DSLR and a tripod, you don't even need a flash. Of course, I do use a flash for a better look, but you don't need to. You can just blend exposures and you can make it look pretty good. So it's easy photography work. There's no stress because there's no people involved, you know. You can take as long as you want to photograph the property. It's easy and it's good for beginners. And for that reason, you don't get paid much because, I mean, you're competing with photographers that have maybe just finished high school. Maybe they just finished a photography course at uni or TAFE. Whatever, they're so happy just to be doing photography work, just as I was initially, you know. Like, We love photographing, and so any work you can get is amazing. It's like you're living the dream. I'm living the dream every day. It's fantastic, but I also need enough money to survive and to make my wife happy. Of course, it's a consideration. And so this particular job, for whatever reason, I was doing a cheap rental as a favor to a mate. As I've insinuated, I wasn't getting paid an awful lot for it. And then this incident happened, and I sort of realized, we're talking close to five grand of equipment that I just dropped on the ground. All of a sudden, you have this realization, like this job was so not worth the risk, right? And every job has the risk that you could damage some of your equipment. You're gonna have cheap work present itself to you, and when you're starting out, that's fantastic. Like, just even work for free. Like, I still occasionally do a free job when I need a portfolio piece for work that I don't do very much of. Like, I don't do a lot of fashion work, so I do occasionally a free fashion shoot, just for something different to do. But when you're starting out, you're going to do some cheap work, but down the track, you have to start weighing up not just what your time's worth, and that's a whole different discussion on its own, but also what's your equipment worth, Every time you go out of the house with your camera, you're risking that equipment. So is it worth it to risk it for a couple $100? I'd say no, right? Especially because you got to think, you're traveling there, you're doing an hour shoot, you're traveling home, that's 3 hours. Then what are you doing? You're loading up the cards and backing up. That's probably an extra hour. And if you include like the time you spent liaising with the estate agent or the client before, just organizing, that takes time. Setting up invoices for the job, keeping track of everything, and then, importing the photos, selecting them, editing them, grading them. That's probably every job. It's probably at least 2 hours per hour shooting for the editing, right? Maybe 3 or 4 hours if it's a wedding. And for real estate photography, it's probably 2 or 3 hours per hour shooting, right? So this hour job is actually more like 6 or 7 hours, It's pretty much a full day. Do you want to be working a full day for just $100 or $200? No, especially because that's not pure profit, right? You have costs of running your business. You have your equipment costs, you have insurance, you have travel expenses, all sorts of stuff which people don't think of. Like your subscription fees for your software, like Adobe, is crazy expensive, but you have to use it, right? Subscription for your accounting software. I pay $50 a month just for my accounting software, but it's totally worth it. But still, that adds up. So yeah, be wary of working too cheap, right? Because there are occasionally big expenses which come along, and you have to be able to pay for them. If you're just making enough money to pay rent and you're not making any extra, well then you are going to be in trouble. As soon as you get a big bill come along, as soon as you get your yearly insurance, or just in your life, you get big bills all the time. So you're not going to be able to handle those when they come along. Be wary of doing cheap work. Value yourself. Value the work that you do. Charge appropriately and look after your equipment better than I do. That's all for me. See you next time. Hope you're having a great day. Bye-bye.